Hi, I'm Dean, and I'm here to talk about the election. This is one of the craziest election campaigns we've ever been through, and I'm worried about it. I used to work in politics. I used to work for the U.S. Army in Berlin as a civilian, and I used to live in Germany for about 15 years. And I'm trying to compare the German experience to our experience in order to elucidate our experience a little bit. And I'm also asking the question, who's the real conservative this election year? And who can save us as we continue an apparent slide in our history, especially in our post-war history, from being the country with the greatest possible influence for good to maybe something else at the moment? Well, we're all familiar with what's going on, and one of the things that's going on, that are going on, is Hillary's troubles. She's just been more or less excused by the director of the FBI, even though a lot of us are asking, wait a minute, if we went out and did with top secret material what she did with her emails, wouldn't we be in a lot more trouble than she's in? People had to ask that question, and it seems like the supporters of Hillary, even if not Hillary herself, are making the same kind of accusations towards Mr. Trump, the other apparent candidate, calling him reckless. But a lot of us are asking, wait a minute, who's actually voted for war? Hillary Clinton in Iraq, in the Iraq War. Who's actually apparently been reckless with national security? So far, Hillary Clinton. Well, that's two of the candidates. What about Bernie Sanders? I'd like to deal with the issue that many people have brought up, that he wants to convert America into Denmark or quite possibly the Soviet Union. He is, after all, a radical who wants to change America for the worst. We all know that. I'm joking, of course. When I was in Germany, I learned something about elections, and I've learned a little bit more about the election system over there since I left. Over there, each party is allowed exactly one commercial during the election campaign, and the election campaign runs a maximum of about 6 weeks, and that's by law. One commercial per party. They can show it several times, but they can only make one commercial. There is one debate between the candidates for the top office, which happens to be the chancellorship. And those debates are marked by something very un-American, namely two candidates who are intelligent and well-educated and who don't scream at each other or insult each other. It's really quite a process. So everything lasts about 6 weeks. There's one commercial and there's one debate. And so quite clearly, as everybody knows, nobody votes in Germany because there's no information. There's only one debate and one commercial. Well, that's wrong. They have a participation rate that is about 25% higher than the participation rate in America. And one reason for that, too, is the parties and the government get together to pay 2/3 of the campaign costs. If we had a system like that, things might be better. Well, what does all this have to do with what I think is the chief problem assaulting all of these candidates and what I think it's really all about? And why should we look to Europe? The chief reason, I think, is that Brexit occurred. About 1 week ago, Great Britain, the United Kingdom, decided to leave Europe. We all know about that. And people are pointing the finger at globalization as the cause, and people are pointing a lot of fingers at the people who voted to leave. There was a narrow majority for leaving Europe. And a lot of people, a lot of observers are saying those who voted to leave Europe must be uneducated and racist. That's actually not true. One of the great breakdowns about all of this, according to the New York Times in a great article that I read a couple of days ago, is this. A lot of people throughout England feel alienated from the system. They feel lonely, they feel cut off from the system, and globalization has led to a lot of that problem. That actually is true. An article in the New York Times, the one I'm talking about, focused on one man who doesn't know who owns the local pub anymore. Used to be, you might be friends with the people who actually owned your local pub, and that was a social center. That kind of tie is now loosening because of globalization. And a lot of other things are happening because of globalization too. Class boundaries are blurring, and that's a good and a bad thing. It's bad because people in a certain class knew where they belonged, and now they don't know where they belong with regard to the class hierarchy. That is something actually that could be good, but at the moment it's bringing a lot of transition and a lot of unsettling feelings. And as a result of all of that, it all adds up to a feeling of lost community. And on top of that, in England, in Britain, there are a lot of migrant workers who've shown up, and now about 12% of the country, as I understand it, is actually foreign born. That's a great thing in many ways, in most ways. But again, to millions of people in a country that's undergoing changes like that, the ultimate thing is a feeling of alienation, not belonging, and fragmentation. There was a writer named C.S. Lewis who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. He wrote theology, he wrote about religion, and he went into this feeling that can develop when a society is going through fragmentation like that. And what it is a longing. It's a longing maybe for the past, maybe for an idealized future, but it really, really hurts. It's a longing because you've been kicked out of the community. You don't know where you belong. And after a while, you hardly know even who you are. So C.S. Lewis went into that, and that's just one example of a thinker who has talked about that. And he talked about this in another respect too, and people allied with him and who know him have talked about this. When there is fragmentation and alienation and what they call a void in the heart because of vast social change, there are basically two solutions: progressives and conservatives. The progressives say what we need to do is keep changing society and aim at a new kind of a future, a utopia. That's pretty common. And then even more common probably is the conservative answer against the progressive answer of the future. The conservatives say, no, we need to go back to the world the way it was. It was Eden. It was great. It was perfect in so many ways. And you can hear a lot of that in Trump's speeches and in the comments that are made by Trump's supporters. So that brings us to one more idea. What about Bernie Sanders? A lot of people, as I've said already, point fingers at him and say, he wants to change us into Denmark or the Soviet Union. He wants radical change. He's got a vision of the future that is just too much. Personally, I don't think that's true. I think one reason why Bernie appealed to so many people is he's actually quite conservative. He is asking the Supreme Court, for instance, to go back and wipe out a decision called Citizens United about the campaign fund problem. He's asking us to go backwards in that respect. That would be a good thing, most probably. And he also made suggestions like, let's cut tuition or eliminate tuition in colleges. That actually would bring us back to the way the situation used to be in America. That's one reason why state universities were funded, or founded even. And on top of that, Bernie wants to go back to an old system of drug prices when drug prices were lower. And on top of all of that, he wants to break up the banks. That's another change. He doesn't want a utopian vision of the future with regard to that. He wants to go back to the system that was before, when capitalists and corporations acted in a way that he thought was more responsible. Again, a look to the past. And more than that even, he wants to go back to a peaceful world. So Bernie voted against the Iraq War, so what are we left with? A candidate, Mr. Trump, who is accused of all kinds of recklessness, who actually never voted for war, hasn't caused any wars, and another candidate who has proven perhaps irresponsible with regard to our nation's highest secrets, and who voted for war. Quite a question. I don't know what the answer is. Thank you.